The grim threat of renewed conflict hangs over the most war-torn country of modern times, the Democratic Republic of Congo. An armed rebellion in the east on the Rwandan border has already forced hundreds of thousands to flee. The DRC army is in disarray, and the Kinshasa government faces allegations of electoral fraud and corruption. My guest is the DRC Minister of Foreign Affairs, Raymond Tshibanda. What hope is there for Congo? Foreign Minister Raymond Tshibanda, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
At the UN in New York just a few days ago, you said that Eastern Congo is back in a situation of war. Do you accept that is a sign of strategic failure on the part of your government?
Not at all, because this country has come a very long way. You will recall that a few years back, the country was divided in pieces. Now it is again reunited. You will recall that we didn't have any elections in that country. In 2006, we went through a first round of elections. In 2012, we had 11. We had the second round of elections. We have legitimate institutions in the country. I cannot say that it's a failure. We are contemplating a foreign aggression against our country.
Well, we'll unpick quite a lot of that over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. Let's leave aside the elections and some of the real question marks that hang over those elections for a moment. Let's stick with what's happening in the east of your country. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced. Hundreds have been killed in just the last few weeks. And there are powerful voices inside your own country who say that ultimately responsibility lies with a government that in 2009 made a peace deal with the very people who are now involved in the armed rebellion?
Well, when we are confronted with a war situation and we are a responsible government, you are called upon to find all ways in order to put an end to that rebellion. And that's what we did in 2009. We gave these people, these Congolese people, a chance to make peace, to come back within the social fabric of our country, and we were expecting them to behave properly as from that time to now.
The phrase "you reap what you sow" comes to my mind because perhaps the key figure in the peace deal that your government struck in 2009 was Bosco Ntaganda, a man known in Congo as the Terminator, a man who for years previous had been sought on an indictment from the International Criminal Court for war crimes, including coercing children to become child soldiers. That was the man that you drew into your armed forces and gave the title of general. Do you regret it now?
Well, seeing where we are today, one could regret what we did then. But
it was a mistake.
No, it was not a mistake at the time, because let's not forget that by so doing, we brought back peace to that region for the last 3 years. It's the first time in a very long time that the people of the Kivus could go back to their business as usual.
And when you say Kivu, you mean North and South Kivu, that area close to the Rwandan and Burundi borders, which has been the source of conflict for so many years and has seen millions, not hundreds of thousands, but millions of people die.
Exactly.
And what I say is that the conflict is resuming again this very day, and that surely is a terrible failure.
It's not a failure on the government side. It's a failure of those who have decided to start the war again. Those who don't believe in peaceful relations between the countries of the region. Who believe that to solve problems, if there are any problems, the only recourse is armed force.
But let's be clear about what has happened. Ntaganda decided, because I think he feared that he was going to be picked up on these war crimes charges, he decided to go away from Goma, where he'd been based, to go back into the bush. Many of his former fighters joined him. They left the Congolese armed forces and they joined him in this armed insurrection. Now, you have more than 20,000 soldiers in this part of North Kivu, they have been forced back into retreat by just a few hundred armed rebels. Again, it's a question of failure. Your security forces are indisciplined, they're corrupt, and they're rotten to the core.
You know better than that. You know that what we are confronted with in that area is not only the M23 or a couple of hundred of rebels. We're dealing with an army, a foreign army, and you know it. It has been documented by the UN.
You're talking about Rwanda?
Yes, I'm talking about Rwanda.
Are you telling me that you believe all of the problems in North Kivu and South Kivu today are being caused by the Rwandan government?
Of course. We don't have the same type of problem elsewhere in the country. You can go from one border to the other of that country, of that big country, and people live in peace. It's only in that area. And we have 9 neighboring countries. And we have people living across borders throughout our country. And we have no problems.
Because Paul Kagame was on this program and he denied categorically that Rwanda is either arming, funding or supporting M23 or the other rebels operating in North and South Kivu. In fact, he said all of the allegations that have been made by your government and indeed by the UN experts' report are utterly unsubstantiated with real evidence.
Well, he is entitled to his opinion. But I would like to say that he's the only one who holds that opinion. I've been talking to everybody else. And they think that they have enough evidence that Rwanda is meddling in internal affairs of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Foreign Minister, if that is true, just tell me this. Why, for the last several years, have Rwandan forces, including elite special forces, been working alongside your own security forces, indeed at times wearing Congolese army uniforms?
No, actually, I think that there is something that we have to clarify. When we decided in 2009 to normalize the relations between our two countries, we decided to join forces in order to put an end to one of the most negative forces that exist in the area, and that's the FDLR. And that came as a result of an agreement. To be clear to people who don't understand all the initials and acronyms,
the FDLR was the name given to the militia group, which was largely made up of Hutu rebels, many of them responsible for the genocide in Rwanda, who had fled across the border into your country, and whom the Rwandan government was determined to root out, and they wanted your help and support.
Absolutely. And we knew that although the government of Rwanda was claiming that they wanted to root out this force, actually they had been there for years and they didn't know it, because as you would recall, from 1998 up to 2003, they occupied that part of our country and they didn't do that much in order to root out that force. But since it became a bond between the two countries, we decided that we, as the government of the DRC, because these people were creating problems on our soil, we want to see them out. So we agreed to join forces with Rwanda in order to get them out.
So Paul Kagame, who you now blame for fomenting this war in your eastern region, is a man that actually you've been working with for years, and indeed his security forces have been cooperating with and working alongside your security forces in this very same eastern region. You'd accept that, wouldn't you?
Oh no, that we have done that publicly. When we decided...
So how can you then sit here and tell me that all of this is Paul Kagame's fault? You've been his ally.
No, wait a minute. There is one thing here. To go together after the FDLR is one thing. And we did it in 2008, 2009, and that operation stopped. From there on, the armed forces of the DRC continued that fight alone. But since we had to reassure the Rwandan government, we agreed that their intelligence officers work with our intelligence officers to ensure that the operations were being carried out.
Yes, you allowed them to continue operations inside your country.
Wait, but yes, inside the country, just for that specific operation. Now, that was not inviting Rwanda to start deciding who is going to rule the North Kivu. That was not inviting Rwanda to decide where the units of the armed force of the DRC were going to be posted. And this is what Rwanda has been doing And that's what created the problem we have today.
I can see it's convenient for you to blame all of the current violence on Rwanda, but you know as well as I do that 20 opposition parties and NGO groups inside your own country, based in Kinshasa, your capital, yesterday demanded the impeachment of your boss, President Kabila, on charges of high treason because they believe that the root of the current problem is the deal struck between him and rebel forces in 2009 that allowed people like Bosco and Tshibanda, a wanted, suspected war criminal, to play a key role in the east of your country. That is the root of your country's problem today.
No, I don't agree with that analysis. And also, I would like to say that it's only in the DRC that the opposition leaders can congregate and make that kind of communique and go freely. And tell me in any other part of that region that would happen. I think that that's a tribute to President Kabila and his government. Now, having said that, let's not shy away from the situation that we have today in that part of the country. And as I said, it has been demonstrated with a lot of evidence that what we have couldn't have happened without the active involvement of Rwanda.
Well, as I say, the Rwandans absolutely reject that contention, but let us look to what happens next. As I've said to you, as we speak today, hundreds of people have been killed in the recent past. Many hundreds of thousands have been displaced. Something has to be done to help the suffering people of the Kivus. Now, you have suggested at United Nations that the UN force already in that part of your country should expand its mission and should take on the role of confronting the armed rebels and policing the border with Rwanda. Do you accept that is not going to happen?
Why do you think that's not going to happen?
Well, as the French ambassador put it just the other day, there is, in his words, a lot of skepticism about the UN extending its role in that way.
Well, I've been meeting with different members of the Security Council, permanent member of the Security Council. At the beginning, for sure, they didn't clearly get the concept. And I think that as you are talking to them, they understand what we're trying to achieve. I would like to say that this is not a demand from the DRC. This is a decision that has been made by the head of states of the whole region, the Great Lake region, all of them, including the president of Rwanda. The decision was made in Addis Ababa in June. It was endorsed by the last African Union Summit. It has been restated lately in Kampala by the heads of state of the Great Lakes region.
But what many people in your country want to know is, if the UN won't expand its mission, and frankly, whatever you say, it is deeply unlikely it will, because it doesn't want to become an active party to the conflict. It wants to be a peacekeeping institution. It does not want to be a party to the conflict. So if that's the case, would you accept a regional Great Lakes military intervention in the east of your country?
I think that this question has been discussed at length. Our position is very clear, and it's the position of the region. The region is involved, but the same region feels that it needs the United Nations and it needs the African Union for us to be effective and deliver the response that is required. We need an international neutral force. This force is going to be made of troops from countries of the region other than the countries which have been involved in the conflict in the DRC, meaning they won't be in that force. We won't find troops from Rwanda, from Uganda, from Burundi, or from the DRC for that matter. But they can come from any other country of the region. They can come from the countries beyond our region.
I just wonder how much weight the UN is going to put on your words and how much credibility it's going to give you when I noticed that back in May 2011 you told the Security Council that your country was essentially stabilized and you were looking forward to the gradual pullout of UN forces from DRC.
Yes, that was...
Well, you couldn't have been more wrong, could you?
No, that was...
Now you want an expanded mission where they become a party to the conflict.
That was 1 year ago, and that was before we discovered that in our back our neighbor was plotting. It was a year ago.
I come back to the phrase I used at the beginning, massive strategic failure. You got it all wrong.
Not at all. I don't buy that. I know what we've been doing. When you deal with any partner or with any other country, you've got to trust the partner or the other party to some extent. Are you telling me that we shouldn't have put some trust in what we are trying to do, building lasting, peaceful relationships with the countries of the region? We did that with Rwanda. We did it with Uganda. We did it with Burundi. We don't have problems with Uganda or Burundi.
If you talk about, Minister, if you talk about trust, it seems to me the basic trust problem is that many in the international community, and indeed many inside your own country, look at your government and its motivations, and they see that top politicians and senior members of the armed forces, to be frank about it, have benefited for years from the chaos, from the violence, and the endemic corruption that we see in DRC. And many of them believe that you and your colleagues in government have no interest in truly stabilizing and pacifying the country.
Well, I don't know where do they get that from. I think that this is a government which has done quite a lot. We do realize that there is still a lot to be done in this country. Let's look at where the country was about 15 years ago. We've come a very long way, economic-wise. When this government came in place, this country was completely in shambles.
According to all the statistics I see, it's still in shambles.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree.
95% of people living on less than $2 a day in one of the potentially richest countries in the world. Well, a life expectation for the average Congolese person of, what, under 50 years of age before death. And you're telling me your country's not in a shambles?
No, it's not. Our country is on the path of recovery. It's not in shambles. We've got to put things in perspective. We've got to see where it were a few years back. And the long travel that we've made since then. I mean, as I said, we were registering inflation by the thousands. That's not the situation.
Minister, I mean, I know from personal experience, having visited your country and reported from it, that you have come from a very difficult place.
Absolutely.
But you are still in that very difficult place, and you don't seem to be making many improvements. And I put it to you that if one reads the US State Department's most recent report on endemic corruption inside your government, if one reads all of the Transparency International and other NGO work that's done on your country, and the World Bank and the IMF reporting on your country, all of them say that your country will not move forward as long as the governance of DRC is so systematically and endemically corrupt.
Yes, we do recognize that we've got a problem with the corruption, and we work on it. And I would like to state that just give us a few more years and you'll see the change that's going to take place in the DRC. When you see what we have delivered over the last few years, you should be entitled to trusting this government.
As I understand it, your country, over the last period, since the end of the active war across your nation, has had $14 billion of international assistance. $12 billion of debt was written off as well. Why, in that case, are ordinary Congolese still mired in desperate poverty?
Because those who were in power before us didn't do anything, and we have to build the country from scratch.
Forgive me, but your President Kabila has been in power for 2 terms now. I mean, he's had a substantial run at changing your country. Yes. You and other ministers have had ample opportunity to change the culture, but it hasn't worked.
Let me ask you a question. For that, during that period, for how many years were we under war?
You've had basically a decade and a half of conflict.
Okay.
But as we've established in this interview, the conflict isn't over.
No. But are you telling me that during conflict you can build a country and build an economy? Especially an economy that you find in such a disarray as it was when we got into power a few years back? The first thing was to reunite the country. The second thing was to bring back peace in the country. The third thing was to start rebuilding the country.
How does it help?
Doing that.
How does it help? Forgive me for interrupting, but how does it help to reunite the country when, according to EU monitors, to the Carter Center for Democracy, the 2011 election was fraudulent? There was massive evidence of vote rigging, of stuffed ballots, and no international organization gave it a stamp of approval.
I read the reports from the beginning up to the end. I didn't find the words that you are using. You are you are putting it in such a way that it sounds as if we had the most fraudulent elections on the continent, which is not the case.
Well,
they pointed.
If you read the report, you would see condemnation of the way that election was handled.
Oh, yes,
33 people lost their lives during the election campaign. Hundreds were wounded, and most of them were associated with the opposition.
You know, there would have been just one death. It would have been one death too many, and we regret that. But going towards these elections, everybody was predicting hundreds of deaths. They didn't occur. And the people who died...
33 deaths during an election campaign is acceptable.
No, it's not. I said it would have been just one, it would have been one too many. So I don't accept one single death. But what I'm saying is this. It's easier to say there were 33 dead. But how did that happen? Who killed them? How did they die? They were not killed by the military force. They weren't killed by the police force. We all regret that there were violence during the elections.
It's not just about elections. This question, how did they die, would also apply to one of your country's leading human rights campaigners, Floribert Chebeya, who died in 2010. Yes. He was assassinated.
A big loss for the country. And I don't know whether he was assassinated. I know that he was murdered.
What we know is that 5 junior policemen were convicted in association with his death. There are now all sorts of stories in your country that the chain of command and the responsibility for the death went much higher. Would you like to see, for example, your chief of police, John Numbi, who is very close to your boss, the president, would you like to see him testify in court and answer as to his role?
This is a case which is before the courts. Would you mind my not commenting on a case that is being seen by the courts?
I'm not asking for any opinion about Mr. Numbi's involvement. I'm just asking you, would you like to see, for the good of your nation, in the interest of your people, Mr. Numbi testify?
I would like to see justice done. And there is nobody who is above the law in our country.
So would you like to see Mr. Numbi testify?
If the justice system feels that he needs to testify, why not? There is nothing to preclude that. Mr. Numbi is not above the law.
Africa...
But it's not up to me to decide. It's up to the justice of this country to decide.
To coin a phrase, winds of change are sweeping through Africa. Are you satisfied that they are sweeping through your country too?
Well, in my country, we went through this way before most of those other countries. We are at an advanced stage today. And we keep revising our systems. Our country is under reform every day. You mentioned the elections. We went through a very difficult time during the last elections. We are revising all the procedures. So there is nothing that is fixed forever in our country. We are a young country, our institutions are young, and we are still building the country.
Foreign Minister Tshibanda, I'm sorry, but we have to end there. Thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.